My husband left me the day before our adoption was finalized. Now he's back, pleading to be part of my family again. Brian and I had spent 2 years in the adoption process after finding out I couldn't have biological children. We'd finally been matched with a beautiful baby girl, and we were supposed to bring her home the next day. Then Brian sat me down and said he'd been lying to himself about being okay with adoption. "I need biological children, and I can't pretend anymore," he said while Sophia's picture sat on our coffee table. "I need to have real children, and you can't give me that." He said he'd already filed for divorce. I sobbed and begged until I lost my voice, but nothing would change his mind. The adoption agency called the next morning saying they couldn't place Sophia with a single mother when she was specifically matched with a stable 2-parent home. I lost my husband and my daughter in 24 hours. After the worst 6 months of my life, I found myself sitting in a different adoption agency filling out paperwork to become a single mother while the caseworker asked if I was absolutely sure I wanted to do this alone. I told her I'd never been more sure of anything. She showed me profiles of kids in foster care who needed homes. And I stopped at a photo of a 7-year-old girl named Alina whose bio said she liked painting and reading, but had trust issues from being bounced between 5 different homes. Something about her eyes looked exactly how I felt when Brian walked out. And I knew immediately she was meant to be my daughter. The first time I met Alina, she was sitting in the foster home's living room pretending to read while actually studying me to figure out if I was going to be just another person who disappointed her. She asked point blank why I wanted to adopt an older kid when everyone wanted babies. And I told her the truth. "So, we're both rejects," she said, testing me to see if I'd get offended. "Exactly, which means we understand each other," I replied and saw her smile for the first time. 3 months later, I was officially her mother, and we spent our first night eating ice cream for dinner while she painted my nails and told me about all the houses that never felt like home. Within a year, she was calling me mom without me asking while I helped her with homework and braided her hair for dance recital. We had inside jokes and Saturday morning pancake traditions and everything I thought I'd lost forever. She still had nightmares sometimes, and there were days when she tested every boundary to see if I'd send her back, but her therapist said she'd never seen a kid bounce back so fast. I wanted to tell her it was because we were healing each other, but that sounded too cheesy, even if it was true. Then Brian showed up at Elena's school play where she was playing the lead role, and I nearly dropped my phone because how the hell did he even know about this? He was standing in the back of the auditorium looking like absolute hell with wrinkled clothes and greasy hair, while I spent the entire performance trying to figure out if I was hallucinating from stress. After Elena's standing ovation, he cornered me in the lobby while she was taking pictures with her friends. And I immediately asked how he found us. "Your sister felt bad for me and told me about the play," he said with bloodshot eyes that kept darting to where Alina was laughing with her theater friends. She said, "You have this whole beautiful life now with your daughter while I'm 43, living in a 1-bedroom apartment eating cereal for dinner because I can't even cook pasta without burning it." The whiskey on his breath at 2 o'clock in the afternoon made me step back, but he kept talking about how he'd tried dating, but every woman ran when he told them he abandoned his wife during an adoption. The ones who stayed only wanted my money, which is mostly gone now from spending everything on fertility treatments with my ex-girlfriend who dumped me when they didn't work. He said, laughing bitterly, "I made the biggest mistake of my life leaving you. I'm so alone that I talk to Uber drivers just to hear another human voice. And I realize now that I had everything and threw it away for some fantasy that doesn't exist." Alina appeared beside me still in her costume and immediately stepped between us with protective fury in her eyes. "Mom, is this creep bothering you?" she asked loud enough for the security guard to start walking over. Brian's face crumbled when he heard her call me Mom. And he started sobbing right there in the middle of the lobby. "That should have been our daughter calling you Mom, but I ruined everything because I'm a pathetic coward who couldn't handle not having biological children." I told him he was right about being pathetic, but wrong about Alina, because she was always meant to be mine, and we found each other without him. "Please, I'll do anything to fix this," he begged, getting on his actual knees while everyone filmed with their phones. The security guard reached for Brian's shoulder, but he grabbed my ankle desperately and said the words that made my blood run cold. "I've been watching you both for months and I know your routines, and I'm not going away until you let me be part of this family because I have nothing left to lose." The security guard yanked Brian's hand off my ankle and pulled him to his feet while two other parents stepped between us, creating a human shield. My hands shook as I grabbed Elena's arm and we pushed through the crowd toward the exit doors. Brian was yelling something behind us, but I couldn't hear it over the blood pounding in my ears. Parents were pulling their kids away from the scene and several had their phones out recording everything. My legs felt like jelly, and I had to lean against the wall for a second before we made it outside. The parking lot was bright with afternoon sun, and I fumbled with my keys trying to unlock the car. Elena climbed into the back seat without saying anything, and I locked the doors immediately. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 while pacing next to the car. The dispatcher answered on the second ring, and I tried to explain what happened, but my words came out jumbled. She told me to slow down and take a breath. I explained that my ex-husband had been stalking us and just grabbed me at my daughter's school. She said officers were already on their way because 3 other parents had called about the incident. I could see Brian through the glass doors, still arguing with the security guard who had him backed against the wall. More parents were leaving with their kids and giving us worried looks as they passed. Within 10 minutes, 2 police cars pulled into the parking lot and officers went straight inside. Another car arrived and a man in a dark suit got out carrying a notebook. He walked over to me and introduced himself as Detective Joshua Guthrie. He asked if I was okay and if Elena needed medical attention. I shook my head and explained what happened from the beginning. He wrote everything down and asked specific questions about Brian's exact words and actions. Another officer was inside talking to parents who saw everything. Detective Guthrie explained that what Brian did was assault, and his admission about watching us for months was criminal stalking. He said they had enough witnesses and video evidence to arrest Brian immediately. I watched through the car window as they brought Brian out in handcuffs and put him in the police car. His face was red and he kept trying to look at us, but the officer pushed his head down. Detective Guthrie gave me his card and said he'd need a full statement at the station, but we could go home first. He recommended I contact a family law attorney immediately about getting a restraining order. The drive home took forever because I kept checking the mirrors to make sure no one was following us. Elena stayed quiet in the back seat playing with the hem of her costume. When we got to our apartment, I checked every room even though I knew Brian was in custody. That night, after Elena finally fell asleep, I went online and ordered a doorbell camera with overnight shipping. I installed the app on my phone and set up motion alerts. Then I went through the apartment checking every window lock and putting chairs under the doorknobs. Every car that drove by made me jump and check the window. I couldn't sit still and kept walking from room to room, making sure everything was secure. Around midnight, I finally tried to sleep, but kept getting up to check on Elena and look out the windows. The next morning, I called the number Detective Guthrie had given me for Sienna Webster. Her assistant said she could see me that afternoon for an emergency consultation. I dropped Elena off at school and explained the situation to the office staff. They assured me they'd keep her inside during recess and that only I would be allowed to pick her up. At the attorney's office, Sienna reviewed my story along with the police report Detective Guthrie had already sent over. She said we needed to file for an immediate restraining order because of Brian's threats and the assault. She explained that while the full process could take weeks, we could get a temporary order within days. She helped me write a declaration describing everything, including Brian's admission about stalking us. That evening, I sat with Elena at the kitchen table and told her that Brian was someone from my past who was confused, and that the police were making sure he stayed away. She listened quietly, then asked if we should pack go bags like she used to in foster care. Hearing that broke my heart, but I told her we were safe at home. She nodded, though I could tell she wasn't fully convinced. The next day, River Kavanaugh called me personally. He said he'd heard about what happened and wanted to discuss new safety measures at the school. They were introducing a pickup password that only I would know, and Elena would wait in the office until I arrived. He assured me Brian's photo had been given to all staff and security with strict instructions to keep him off school property. He promised they were taking the situation very seriously and would do everything possible to keep Alina safe. After the call, I finally rang my sister. She answered right away, already crying and apologizing. I cut her off and told her that siding with Brian could have gotten us seriously hurt. She tried to explain that he just seemed sad and lost, but I didn't want to hear it. I told her she'd broken my trust by giving him details about our lives, and I couldn't forgive her right now. She cried harder, but I hung up. 2 days later, Anastasia Schaefer called with an opening for an emergency session. Alina and I went together. While we talked, Anastasia had her draw. Alina drew our apartment surrounded by thick black walls, with more walls between us and the door. Anastasia explained that Alina was processing her fear and creating safety through her drawings. She helped me see how to support Alina without letting my own fear spill over. She reminded me, kids pick up on adult anxiety. You need to project calm, even when you don't feel it. The next week, Sienna said it was time to file the official restraining order. We spent 3 hours at her office going over every detail. She'd obtained videos from parents who had recorded the incident and made screenshots of Brian on his knees, grabbing my ankle. Those were added to our filing along with my declaration and the police report. She said the evidence was strong and that judges treat stalking cases involving children very seriously. That night, I found Alina sitting on her bed with every light in her room turned on, her lamp, night light, everything. She was pretending to read, but kept glancing at the door. When I asked if she was okay, she just shrugged and said she wasn't tired. I sat beside her, rubbed her back, and she finally admitted she was scared Brian might come to our apartment, even though I'd told her the police were handling it. The next morning, she asked if she could stay home from school. I could see she was testing me to see if I'd really protect her or if I'd force her to go like other adults probably had before. I let her stay home, and we spent the day watching movies on the couch while she kept her backpack beside her, ready to run if needed. I told her we couldn't let fear control our lives and that she'd need to return to school tomorrow, but today was okay for a mental health day. She nodded and curled up against me. But I noticed she kept checking that the door was locked every time she went to the bathroom. 3 days later, when I got to work, I found red roses tucked under my windshield wiper. There was no note, but I instantly recognized Brian's handwriting on the small envelope. My hands shook as I took photos from different angles, then carefully sealed the flowers inside a plastic bag I had in my car. I called Detective Guthrie right away, and he told me to bring everything to the station so it could be documented as evidence of continued contact after he'd been told to stay away. The detective took my statement and photographed everything, but explained that since the restraining order hadn't been served yet, they couldn't arrest Brian for leaving flowers, even though we both knew it was intimidation. 2 days later, Sienna called to say the judge had reviewed our filing and granted a temporary restraining order, effective immediately. She said we had a hearing in 3 weeks for the permanent order, and I would need to testify about everything that happened. I felt some relief, but she reminded me the order was just paper until Brian was officially served and made aware he was legally required to stay away. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with texts from my sister, pouring out guilt and apologies for giving Brian our information. She went on about how bad she felt, but never once asked if we were safe or admitted the danger she'd caused. I didn't reply, but I took screenshots of everything, including her admission about telling him our location and the school play details. Later that evening, while scrolling through social media, I noticed several new follow requests from accounts with no profile pictures and strange usernames. When I checked, I saw they'd all been created within the past week. The only activity on them was liking old photos of Alina and me. One had liked a picture from her birthday party. Another had gone through and liked every single photo from our summer vacation. I documented it all with screenshots, then set my accounts to private and blocked each suspicious profile, though I knew Brian would just create more. The next morning, Detective Guthrie called back and explained that until Brian was served with the restraining order, they could only record his violations but couldn't make an arrest. He said it was frustrating for everyone, but the law required a process, and stalking cases often needed evidence to build before stronger action could be taken. I wanted to scream at the unfairness, but instead I thanked him and focused on keeping careful records. A few days later, Alina's teacher emailed me about changes in her behavior. She said Alina was keeping her backpack fully packed at her desk instead of using her cubby, and she'd stopped participating in group activities. The teacher also noticed Alina watching the door constantly and asked if things were okay at home. I called the school, gave a brief explanation, and we agreed on a plan that would allow Alina to keep her backpack with her if it helped her feel safer. That Thursday at 2 a.m., I woke to a notification from our doorbell camera. When I checked the footage, my blood ran cold. Brian's car was driving slowly past our apartment building, and in one clear frame, he was looking directly at our windows. The license plate was visible, and the timestamp showed he'd driven by 3 times in 10 minutes. I saved the video, uploaded it to the cloud, and sent it immediately to both Sienna and Detective Guthrie. The following week, Sienna had me come into her office to prepare for the restraining order hearing. She explained that Brian would probably have an attorney trying to downplay his behavior. She coached me to stay calm and stick to the facts instead of letting emotion take over, even though the whole thing made me want to cry and scream. She reminded me that judges respond best to clear evidence, not emotional pleas, and thanks to all the documentation, we had plenty. That same day, my phone rang from an unknown number. When I didn't answer, it immediately rang again from a different one. Brian's voicemails piled up, switching between crying apologies and angry rants that I was cruel for keeping him away from the family he deserved. I didn't listen to most of them fully, but saved and transcribed the key parts for evidence. The next morning, River showed me the new pickup system. Alina would wait in the main office until I arrived. She didn't like being different from the other kids, but I told her it was temporary. That night, my sister texted saying she wanted to help and offered to write a statement about Brian's drinking. I forwarded it to Sienna, who said it could help. 2 days later, Brian emailed me from his personal account. The subject line was just my name repeated over and over. The email rambled about Sophia, a baby he claimed should have been ours, and how Alina wasn't really ours the same way. I sent it to Sienna and Detective Guthrie without finishing it. During Alina's therapy session that week, she asked if Brian could take her away and send her back to foster care. I reassured her our adoption was final and legal, while Anastasia explained Brian had no rights. Still, Alina clung to my hand tightly. By Friday, Brian was officially served with the restraining order. Guthrie warned he might escalate. That weekend, Alina had nightmares and woke up screaming, afraid someone was taking her away. I calmed her with hot chocolate and cartoons until she fell asleep again. On Monday, Sienna told me Brian had hired an attorney, Constantine Pugh, who wanted supervised contact. She refused, insisting on maximum protection. I also reported everything to Alina's adoption caseworker, who assured me it wouldn't affect her status and even offered a court letter. Midweek, Anastasia called. Brian had shown up outside her office, staring at the building before leaving. She alerted security. That afternoon, parents from the school play reached out, offering witness statements and videos showing Brian grabbing my ankle and admitting to stalking us. Their support helped counter Brian's manipulative voicemails about just wanting to apologize. Hearing other people confirm what happened made me feel less crazy for being afraid. Thursday, I sat Alina down to go over our safety plan. She memorized my number, practiced what to do if Brian showed up, and even drew a map of our apartment with exits and safe neighbors. Her small hands shook, but she kept working carefully. The next morning, River called saying Brian was parked just past school property taking photos. Police came, but he'd already left. When I picked Alina up, she was waiting with her backpack on, ready to run. That evening, Detective Guthrie brought me a folder with safety tips, changing routes and times, which we started immediately. It was exhausting, but I couldn't risk Brian watching us again. My sister mailed a $5,000 check, which I used for deadbolts, motion lights, and a new camera system. Alina watched the locksmith install everything, asking questions about how safe the locks were. Her teacher also arranged a private entrance through the staff lot, with the janitor walking her to class each morning. Then Brian hacked my streaming account, changing the profile names to messages begging me to forgive him. Shaking, I changed every password and set up two-factor authentication, spending the night locking down all my accounts. 3 weeks later, Sienna said our hearing was set for Tuesday. She came over Sunday with a binder of evidence, and we practiced my testimony for hours until I could stay calm. In court, Brian looked thinner, sitting with Constantine. When I testified, I went through everything: his stalking, threats, and hacking. My voice cracked, but I kept going. The judge took notes, asking me to clarify details. After an hour, my throat was raw, but I finished.